Hello everybody. Today we are going to be reviewing the movie The Last Duel. Now there is a lot to unpack in this movie, I will say. And just before we actually I don't know why I closed that. Just before we get into actually talking about what goes on in the movie, there was actually, because I went to see this in theaters. Now this movie, its runtime is 2 hours and 32 minutes. So if you're going to see it on the big screen, get ready, because it is a long one, but I think it was actually important in this case that it was long, because they are telling an actual historical story. So, it made a little bit more sense that this one was a little bit longer, because they had to tell out the whole story from the viewpoints of 3 different people, which I think was actually a very interesting take on a movie. I don't think that's really ever been done before. Now, I don't know, the style of chapters in a movie seems to be like a common theme now that I'm seeing with certain movies, depending on how they do it. Pig just did that recently, which I have a review ready for. I took a week off just because I needed a little bit of a refresher, and I will talk about some other stuff in another video. I think I'm going to take some time off here soon. I'll upload what I have, but then I'm just going to take a month off once I'm done with all that, because I think I just need to kind of de-stress a little bit. I've been, I don't know, stressed out lately just about some things, and I just need to take some time. Maybe that was enough. Maybe I've said enough right there. So anyway, where was I? Oh yes, the directing style of chapters I think is a very interesting way to do things. You can't even see what's on the shirt because it's so faded. Yeah, I was just saying, yeah, Pig has done it, which I have ready to go, and this movie did it too. Now, I don't think this movie had nearly as many chapters, because it was only 3 different people's stories to tell, and I guess in Pig it was one person's story, but multiple chapters, kind of leading up to the climax, just like this movie did. And the director actually said that he really wanted to set the scenes. So Ridley Scott was the director. I think it was him that said. I'm pretty sure it was him that said, like, setting the scenes in this was important. Like, even the background stuff, and like the silence in certain parts to really set the mood, and just, yeah, like, so this movie was a very similar to The Green Knight in a way. I would say, anyway, it was very similar to that, whereas it was, the attention to detail was very important in this movie, and so, like, as you're watching, you're trying to pay attention to the scenes, especially the ones where they're just sitting there talking, because even the, like, crackling of the fire and certain things in the background really set the tone for the scene, and yeah, it was just fabulous. Now, one of the things I wanted to touch on before we actually get into the whole story is the battle scenes. Oh my god. Now, this movie was rated R, or 18A or R, whatever you want to call it these days, I guess. I don't know what the official rating says on IMDb. Oh, 18A. So it was 18A, so not quite rated R, but close enough. So, yeah, I would not say this is a movie for kids, obviously due to the subject matter of the movie, for sure. And I didn't really know this story that well, and that's kind of funny, because I do like history, like medieval history, so I'm surprised that I hadn't really heard about this story, but I'm glad I actually did go to see this movie in theaters and got to see the story unfold on the big screen. I think it was interesting. And you're obviously going to have your own interpretation of this story as to who you believe, and as to who you believe was right, and who was telling the truth. And I have my own kind of conclusion as to what I think was actually happening. but I could be totally wrong because we would never actually know unless we were there in the moment, right? And back then, it would have been much harder to. It would have been much more difficult to come out and say some of the things that this woman was saying, because if she was wrong, she would have been put to death. So you're really, and she didn't know that either. So she was really risking her life for what she believed was the right thing, I guess. And I would say that now, if you don't know the story, I guess she kind of like, I want to say like paved the way for other women to come out and, not be scared anymore of things that happen to them, I guess. They actually do have a voice, right? So I would say that was, now this was way back in 1386. So you got to think, back then somebody could have easily just killed her for what she had said, and nobody would have even thought a thing of it, right? Much harder to, obviously, in these times, when where the time period we're living in now, that would be impossible to do. You would be going to jail, or possibly, the penalty of death would be put on you for your crimes. So, yeah, much trickier of a situation in these times, for sure. Trickier of a situation. Why did I word it that way? Anyhow, so this movie is starring Adam Driver, who went from swinging lightsabers to swinging swords and did a fabulous job at it. And can I just say that I remember like the hype behind the whole the shirtless scene and the whole Star Wars franchise, and then everybody was like extremely disappointed. I don't even know why that was such a big thing in that film anyway, but I guess it was more maybe to try to draw a more female audience into the movie, thinking that a guy shirtless would do that, but I don't know. It was just kind of weird. Anyway, it was kind of a lackluster scene. It was like 2 seconds of him just kind of standing there doing absolutely nothing, from what I remember. Anyway, in this movie, he's friggin' jacked. So, ladies, if you are an Adam Driver fan, I would say this is the movie to go see him if you want to have an actual proper few shirtless scenes with him in it, because you're going to get more of that in this movie. So this movie is starring Matt Damon as Sir Jean de Courage, I believe was how you pronounce it. Adam Driver played Jacques Legris. Jodie Comer played Margaret de Courage. I could be pronouncing those names wrong. Harriet Walter was obviously Jean's mother. Nicole de Courage. And then we had Ben Affleck as Pierre D'Alcon, and for some reason I thought it was King Henry, but it was actually Alex Lothar played King Charles. VI, what is that in Roman numerals? I'm just going to say King Charles VI. And then we had Nathaniel Parker as Sir Robert de Boulier, and what was her friend's name? Marguerite? It might be Marguerite. Marguerite's friend's name was Marie, played by Tulia Hatton. And that's literally most of the main, I would say the main cast right there. I guess Martin, is it Kokas, played Crespin? And that was it. That was the main cast. I'm not sure who the Herald guy was. It just says William Houston Herald at the Duel, but I don't remember who he was exactly. Anyway, so we start out with this battle. Actually, we start out with the lance scene between Jean and Jacques, or Legris and Courage. Let's just go with that. And oh my god, it was just like an epic sound, just the clashing of the, I'm not sure whether it hits the armor or the shield, but just the clash just really set the tone for this movie right away. And then it goes back to, so we're in 1386 when we start, and then we go all the way back to 13, I believe it was 70. So they were much younger, and they were friends, friends at one point in time in their lives. Not anymore, obviously, due to the fact that they're having a duel to the death. But we don't really know why. So we go back to this battle, and it seems that the Lord who rules the land, DL Khan, or D, yeah, I'm gonna say DL Khan. I think that would be how you pronounce it. I might be, if I'm butchering these names, I'm terribly sorry, but doesn't really favor Courage as much as he does Legree, and that kind of starts to separate the two of them when Courage moves to obviously has his own land where he farms and so on and so forth, but he is a really good warrior. He seems to have luck on his side throughout a lot of this movie because in one scene they're being ambushed by the Scottish, and there's just arrows like tinking off his armor, but somehow never hitting him. So he just got extremely lucky in some of these scenarios, that's for sure. Legree, all of a sudden, so they had this thing called a dowry, and when Courage's first wife died, I guess she owned some land that was supposed to be given to him as part of the dowry. Now, DL Khan doesn't want him to have it, so he starts giving stuff to Legree. Legree comes to the land at one point in time and says that he has to pay him, but Courage doesn't have the money, so he gives him what he can so that he doesn't go back empty-handed. And I would say that was the very first time that they actually kind of became a little bit separated. You can kind of see them slowly turning into enemies at that point. And then as Courage moves up through the rankings over the years, and Legree stays as a squire, like they were both originally, now Courage is a full-blown knight. He gets knighted on their, I guess, crusade to Scotland. And I believe they are both French. So a lot of this movie takes place, oh my god, in Paris. I don't know why I got stuffy all of a sudden. Just give me a second. Okay, so as I was saying, Courage and Legree start to separate. He becomes a knight, and Legree stays as a squire and works with DL Khan as his, I guess, kind of like financial advisor as well, to make sure that DL Khan has all his money, and eventually Legree is given the position that that Courage was originally supposed to be appointed. So he comes up to them and gets angry with them and says, "How could you?" And then he ends up getting, banned from the courts, I do believe. So they couldn't bring up the legal matter anymore in the courts. He does try to sue him a few times, but that fails miserably each time because obviously DL Khan has much more power than Courage does because he is a lord. So I think when it was after his crusade to Scotland, Courage ends up when he's on his way to Paris, he stops by to see the where was he going? I can't remember. He stops to see DL Khan and Legree again, and wants Legree to respect him and call him sir because now he is a knight. And Legree kind of mocks him in a little bit, and I think that was really when Courage was absolutely just done with Legree's attitude, and he felt like he was being diminished, even though he had moved up through the rankings, and Legree had just kind of stayed where he was, because things were working out for Legree anyway, so why would he change his position when he was clearly in a much better spot than Courage, I guess, because he didn't have to go out and fight on the battlefield anymore. He could just stay stay with the Lord, stay with Deal Khan, and everything would be fine. He'd be safe, right? So obviously, there's a little bit of tension between Deal Khan and Courage because he fights for the king. He fights for King Charles and not Deal Khan, and Deal Khan has power, obviously not as much as the king, but so I think, was it after, which crusade was it after? It was much after Scotland, I think. I can't remember where he was. Oh no, it was while he was away in Paris. That's right. When Legree comes to their house unannounced, and and Marguerite, who is now married to Courage, thanks to the help of her father, Sir Robert de Thibault, I do believe. So her maiden name would have been Thibault. Now, he offered Courage land as well. That was taken by Legree and Deal Khan, so that was an unfortunate circumstance. So it seems no matter what Courage does, Legree is always one step ahead, thanks to the help of the Lord, because Thibault did have payment, right, just like everybody else, and he couldn't make it because of everything being short. So he had to give up that land, and obviously that didn't make Courage very happy. So when Marguerite finally says that she was raped by Legree, Courage gets angry and spreads the story all across the land. And that was I would say that was pretty much where Courage's story ended. And then they go back to 1370, the battle scene, and they tell it from the viewpoint of Legree. So Legree doesn't actually meet Marguerite until much later on, which I found kind of funny. It seems that Courage and Marguerite kind of stay on their land. They don't really go anywhere, obviously due to the fact that they've been kicked out of the courts. And they finally do get to go to this one event, and Legree and Courage kind of make up, and Marguerite gives Legree a kiss, and right then, that scene there, they kiss, and she kind of backs away in like a very odd way, because she does actually say at one point that she finds Legree handsome. Now, I can't remember whether it was before that or after that, but her and Legree are a little bit more like, they have a better IQ than Courage. Courage is just a very stubborn, like, set in his way kind of person. Doesn't read much, obviously, because he doesn't have the time for it. He's out on the battlefield, he's farming, so on and so forth. He's always constantly working to pay off his debt, and he doesn't really have the time to sit down, and he's all about making money, just to survive, right? So, and Legree doesn't have to worry about that anymore because he's with Deal Khan, so why would he have to worry about money? He's got his position, he's set. So he starts talking to Marguerite, and they kind of hit it off, and the more that they are talking, or the more that they see each other, you can kind of feel like this sexual tension between the two of them, until Legree finally shows up at the house. And he showed up with somebody else, but why can't I find that guy? I can't remember who he was with. Oh, I guess it was I guess his name was Adam Lovell. The other guy that was with him, played by Adam Nagitas. I think that he does look familiar. So I think he shows up and says that his horse is getting reshoed, and he just wants to come in to keep warm. And then obviously Legree is with him, and he kind of chases her up the stairs, and they end up having sex. Now, in Legree's mind, there wasn't any. It was consensual. There wasn't any rape. And I don't know, he was very suave, like he was a very believable person. So I almost, and I know this is bad to say, but his story kind of seemed to fit the pieces together a little bit better than the other two stories. Now I'm going to say obviously Courage's story, you don't really know because he was away a lot of the time, right? And he portrayed himself as like a loving husband. He was always concerned with his wife, and I mean, he did get a little angry when he found out Legree was, when he found out that it was Legree that had raped her, but he seemed to be like honoring like his wife in a very certain, like in a very, he was defending his wife's honor in his version of the story. And then Legree's version of the story is just him, and obviously now he has all these accusations against him, but they don't think anything's going to become of it. And then when they get into the courts, things start to get a little bit more intense. And then we go to Marguerite's version of the story. So Marguerite is mostly spending time alone, either with with Courage's mother, who is really mean to her for whatever reason. She says that she's only brought shame to this family's name and so on and so forth about her, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense why his mother would be so mean. And then you find out that his mother was actually raped when she was younger too, and instead of coming out, oh my god, saying anything about it, she just kept her mouth shut, which is not probably the thing she should have done, but I guess back in those times, she talks about the power of men is more, power of men is, nothing matters except for the power of men. I don't know exactly how she worded it, but she says a lot about the power of men being, I guess, higher up than any other person's word, or what is right, I suppose. If you have power, I guess rights don't really matter, is what she's essentially trying to say. So, Marguerite spends a lot of time with her friend, Marie, and as the story goes along in her version, Courage seems very distant from her when she tells him about what happened between her and Legree. He really gets angry and tells her that Legree isn't going to be the last man to know her, and then she ends up getting pregnant by the time she's actually in the courts. Now, I would find this very odd if I was being asked all these questions. Now, they're asking her, does she feel pleasure when she is with her husband? Does she reach a pleasurable climax during sex? And she says yes. Now, they're saying that over the how many ever years she's been with Courage, she hasn't actually been pregnant, right? And then when she was with Legree, all of a sudden 6 months after Legree was apparently had a one-time thing with her, she is now pregnant. So everybody's a little bit confused by that. Now, this is when she learns that she can be burned alive, and it usually lasts about 30 minutes. Now, what was surprising to me was that her friend Marie didn't believe her, which I was like, wow, you spent all that time being friends and talking about him, and then when something actually bad happens, she just said, well, I didn't claim rape. So it's just like, wow, like, are you not going to take the side of your friend? That's just crazy. So, no, her friend actually in the courts brings up the whole thing about her finding Legree handsome. So I was like, oh my God, they're going to just throw her to the wayside right there. But because Courage says that he wants to duel to the death, it ends up being that that's what happens, and her fate is based on if Courage wins the battle, which he eventually does. But he got extremely lucky because he does get stabbed in the leg, so he didn't make it out completely unscathed, but that is okay because he does end up winning. And I was kind of watching that scene because there's so much going on, like between the crowd and her, and she's got tears in her eyes while the two of them are fighting. Because now here's my theory: Legree's story was the one that was correct, where she kind of puts up like a playful fight, and then they end up having sex, and she's obviously enjoying it, right? She was kind of like playfully saying no, but then she lets it happen because she wanted it to happen. And then in her version of the story, she puts up a hell of a fight, and she obviously can't overpower Legree because he's stronger than her, and she ends up getting raped in her version of the story. So here's my interpretation: is Legree was right because even when Courage is going to kill him, he says there was no rape. Like, he's begging for forgiveness. And at this point, Courage just won't believe anything Legree says anyway because he hates him so much. So he takes a dagger and literally stabs it through his mouth, out through the back of his skull. And just the music in that scene, and just watching the camera zoom out and the two of them just kind of like sitting there with Courage over, it just chills up my spine. It was just like, oh, like Courage got what he wanted, I think, and he was doing it for his own selfish reasons. And I don't think that Marguerite got what she wanted. I think she was actually in love with Legree, and Legree's version of the story was what actually happened. This is just my interpretation. And she was hoping that she could talk them into a duel to the death because she knew she could play that game. This is just my interpretation. And she was hoping that Legree would kill Courage, and maybe she could swing it somewhere where she could just end up being with Legree. And even then, yeah, I'm not sure how she would have swung that, because if Legree had won, she would have been killed. So it was very, like, oh my God, her life was on the line. So I'm not really sure how she was hoping to make it out of that, whether Legree would have maybe said after the fight, like, don't kill her. I want to be with her because I love her. Maybe that's what she was hoping. However, if her version of the story was right, that is tragic, and Legree did deserve to die. And anyhow, so I think it shows, like, was it a few years later, the end scene there, and she's just sitting in the field with her son, and then it tells you what actually happened. So Courage ended up dying a few years later in the Crusades. I'm not really sure where they were crusading to. And Marguerite never remarried. So both the men she loved died, and she just ended up living the rest of her life on her own with her child. So it is a very interesting story. Now, obviously everybody's going to interpret which person they believe is the actual storyline correctly. So that is up for interpretation. But that's what I got out of the last scene. She seemed a little bit sad, basing it off the version of her story of Courage being kind of mean with her, that I think she wanted him dead, or maybe she just wanted them both dead. I'm not sure. But I'm thinking she wanted Legree to be the one to kill Courage. I could be wrong. Now, I don't know as if they would kill her right away, obviously because she was pregnant, so I believe they would have let her give birth to the child and then maybe killed her, and I don't know who the child would have went to, whether it would have went to Courage's mother or whoever else, but anyhow, that's just my interpretation of it. So, now, I will say this movie did kind of just come out of nowhere, for sure, and all of a sudden I just seen like a preview for it. Now, I'm not sure if I had it in my YouTube list of movies to review already, but all of a sudden it just kind of came out of nowhere last week again, and I was like, oh my god, this looks actually really good. And they were saying that it was going to be like movie of the year. Now, obviously, we're not quite done with the year yet because it's only October. So we got a couple more months and quite a few, I would say probably worthwhile movies to go see that are coming out. Obviously, Spider-Man in December, the James Bond movie, Halloween Kills is another good one that I'm probably going to go see on the big screen. What else is there? I think that might be like really it for big blockbuster movies. I think Venom is out right now. But this is definitely a contender for sure. I'm not sure if it'll be number one, but I think this one is going to be pretty close for me, just because it is based on actual events. So, I did rate this 10 out of 10 on IMDb, but my actual Heart of Hearts rating, and I really don't do this for too many movies unless I absolutely enjoy every little bit of it, and I really have to be immersed in the movie. And this movie, my eyes were glued to the screen the entire time because you have to pay attention, and it was just, it just really drew you in. And the moment I fell in love with this movie, I would say, actually, which is kind of funny, is when they went back and told the story, because I wasn't sure how they were going to make this movie over 2 hours without, because the story itself isn't really that long when you think about it. It happens over a span of, I guess, 16 years. So, I mean, there is still a lot to cover, even if you had just done it from the standpoint of one person's view, I guess. But I suppose because they are going through certain years as they kind of move up a little bit, that they wanted to kind of get it from everybody's standpoint. So the moment I really fell in love with this movie was when they went back to the battle scene, and I actually had to kind of do a double take, because I was like, we're back here again, and then all of a sudden I realized, oh, they're telling it from this point of Legree. Yes, this is good. I'm going to love this movie for sure now. So 11 out of 10 is my true Heart of Hearts rating for this movie. And I would say, actually, it is worth going to see it on the big screen. I think I said that at the very beginning as well, too. But anyhow, so I think I've talked for about probably a little over 30 minutes now about this movie. But there was so much to unpack, like I said at the very beginning of the review. So, as always, like, share, subscribe, and comment down below your thoughts on this film if you've seen it. I would say it's definitely a worthwhile watch on the big screen. And if you are lucky enough, because it doesn't seem to be... Now, this is one of those movies where it's kind of overshadowed by a whole bunch of other big blockbusters like Halloween, James Bond, and Venom are out right now, so obviously those are going to be the three big money makers. But I would say that this is one of those kind of like hidden gem movies, right? That kind of like what Netflix does with their hidden gems section. I would say this would be one of those that don't go see the big blockbusters on the opening weekend. Go see this one. Wherever you are, or while it's out in theaters, because it is worth it on the big screen. And if you're lucky enough, like me, you'll probably have the theater to yourself, because a lot of people are going to be going to see all the other bigger blockbusters that are out right now. So that is all I have to say, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye bye for now.